Before we start, we need to clear something up. The Dark Ages were not dull. Truth be told, the greater part of the reasons individuals think the early Middle Ages were dim are only normal misinterpretations about the era. In the prologue to Top 10 Reasons the Middle Ages Were Not Dark, I stated, he term, dim ages, is nearly as antiquated as the period itself. It was instituted during the 1330s by Petrarch, the Italian researcher, to allude to the decrease of Latin writing. It was later taken by the Protestant reformers 16th century and afterward the individuals from the Enlightenment 18th century as a harsh term with a lot more extensive ramifications, since they saw their own illumination as missing from the prior period. Top 10 Terrifying Assaults on Free Speech Happening Right Now. In 2011 I kept in touch with one of our most dubious articles, Top 10 Reasons We Should Revive the Dark Ages. Since we are clearly observing that materialized, I am beginning to change my mind. Here, lamentably, are the main 10 signs that we are presently going into another time of darkness. 10 Social media censorship. Twitter has as of late reported another device in their battle against free discourse and the quest for astuteness, individual by individual blocking. The new setting will permit clients to choose who can and can't answer to their tweets. As it were, you can minister a whole discussion wherein just those individuals who concur with your point will be noticeable to anybody perusing. Facebook is presently adding notices to specific presence on caution individuals that they may contain bogus data in any event. When they don't, and Instagram is erasing posts that may make offense some people. On top of the entirety of this, whole gatherings are by and large inside and out restricted from the entirety of the previously mentioned locales for basically affronting others or spreading data which the proprietors of those destinations don't concur with, regardless of whether they are correct or not. In the US, where the vast majority of these organizations are based, they are inside their legitimate rights to smother free discourse. The last answer for these awful assaults on the sharing of information is for new destinations to rise, liberated by political predisposition of very rich person proprietors and investors who consider the to-be line as being a higher priority than the adoration for wisdom. 1. Incidentally, don't hesitate to include me as a companion. Facebook. I guarantee I won't control you. 9. Suppression of speakers on campuses. Incorporates the option to fight discourse you can't help contradicting. The individuals who punch protesters at rallies can no more profess to help free discourse than Lenin could profess to help private enterprise. In any case, there's practicing your just option to dissent, and afterward utilizing option to totally close down the perspectives you're challenging. As of late, it appears that protesters are pointing exclusively for the last mention. Creating a domain your adversary is hesitant to enter appears to have truly taken off around 2013. Preceding that, fights at grounds seldom hindered a welcomed speaker from joining in. Today, you find out about dropped addresses with mind desensitizing regularity. Speakers like Milo Yiannopoulos, cut above, have been pursued off school grounds, as have speakers like professional premature birth Supreme Court equity Carol Bayer. Each time it occurs, it exhibits how little worth is currently positioned on free discourse and edified discussion, versus basically yelling your adversary down. We ought to be staggeringly worried that alleged bastions of free discourse, in particular colleges, are presently the wellspring of so much enemy of opportunity. At the point when discussion closes, so does the revelation of new information. This is presumably a decent and ideal opportunity to suggest our rundown on 8 YouTube censorship. The men behind the shade at Google have chosen to spare us from ourselves and stifle paranoid notions and other substance they disdain. Their explanation is that they are keeping us from being misdirected. That positively infers a fantastically astute statement by T.S. Eliot: the greater part of the insidiousness in this world is finished by individuals with well-meaning goals. The inspiration of Google, in the event that it is valid, can appear to be from righteous beginnings. However, there is one issue: fear-inspired notions are frequently obvious. For instance, Project MK Ultra, the astonishing CIA mind control try. What's more, shouldn't something be said about the hypothesis that help for the Iraq War was dishonestly made because of lies about children being tossed from incubators? And discussing wars, the Vietnam War depended on one incredible enormous falsehood, talked about just in paranoid notion hovers until the CIA affirmed it to be valid. I am, obviously, alluding to the Gulf of Tonkin occurrence. What number of conversations of schemes are being expelled and covered up by Google at this moment? Furthermore, doubtlessly right currently is the point at which we most need these conversations around China and the coronavirus and the deep state in governmental issues. Luckily, as a result of the way that Listverse bargains just incidentally in tricks, our video above has been disregarded so far by Google Blue Pencils. Appreciate it while you can. 7. Google search destruction. In the most recent 3 decades we have given over the curation of the abundance of human information to an organization that had the proverb, "Don't be malicious," until 2018 when it discreetly positioned it in the last sentence of its set of accepted rules, presently only an untimely idea. The most recent 2 years have seen Google logically crush the nature of its list items, first filling them with supported posts and now, as of May 2020, apparently supplanting the whole list with results that give Google and its companions monetary help during coronavirus. Online website admin gatherings are brimming with site proprietors proclaiming their locales dead as 50 to 70% of their traffic from search has been sliced for large brand results from organizations lined up with Google's reality see. It is presumably reasonable for state that the fate of the Internet is one in which most query items end in a 404 blunder page not found. Google is adequately closing down the Internet. With all the inquiry traffic gone, the locales that do remain will be constrained to look to membership models. 6 chained Bibles. Remember the anchored Bibles from the last Dark Ages? Clue: they were tied up in light of the fact that they were unbelievably important, not to stop individuals understanding them. Prepare to have your mind blown. They're returning. As Google has started what is by all accounts its last invasion against little and medium data sites and YouTubers, more data is either vanishing or is being bolted behind paywalls and membership models. This is something we talked about for Listverse in the past. Once all the best substance is bolted away, we will have at long last arrived at where the web is the specific inverse of what it was intended to be. Rather than the scattering of data to the entire world for nothing, paid for by promotions clearly, we will have a firmly bolted vault of information for just the individuals who can stand to understand it. What's more, not normal for the Bible in the Middle Ages, we don't have web ministers who can peruse it to us consistently. This genuinely is the purposeful evacuation of learning for everything except a tip-top rich. Furthermore, coincidentally, this isn't just about little sites and creators. 5 Joe Rogan. Spotify, the greatest name in podcasting, has recently reported that he is moving to Spotify where, for the bother of tuning in to a promotion, you can get to his webcasts. He is most likely the principal huge name to reveal to Google he won't endure their oversight. Up to this point, Rogan was winning $36 million every year for his web recordings with Google, however Spotify tricked him in with a guarantee of $100 million. It is no big surprise he is happy to face the challenge and move to a paid assistance. It is incredible for Joe as far as oversight, until Spotify gets purchased by Google or starts to actualize its own limitations on content. It does, be that as it may, serve to show us exactly how prohibitive access to data is going to become. Only the reality of the situation will become obvious eventually whether a mass departure of substance creators to this new stage will serve to widen or decrease our general access to information. We are seeing a union right now into a couple of incredibly huge companies, and their standards and morals, or scarcity in that department, will decide whose voices and what stories we as a whole hear in the future. 4 Wayback Machine censorship. Who controls the past, ran the party motto, controls the future, who controls the current controls the past. These words from George Orwell's alarmingly judicious novel 1984 sound valid especially today. The Wayback Machine or Internet Archive is a stunning website with depictions of most pieces of the Internet returning decades. It has, on numerous events, been utilized to uncover beguiling altering from the prevailing press. However, tragically it has now brought a risky turn down the dim street of censorship. Recently, the Wayback Machine started denoting certain documented pages as disinformation, especially as it identifies with the coronavirus. It is retroactively expressing that authentic news or occasions were false. It is just a short time before they begin erasing the first substance itself or supplanting deception with realities as controlled by anonymous movers behind the scenes. 3 Free discussion in science. Scientists and specialists are presently routinely terminated for disclosures or in any event, embracing speculations that are currently esteemed in opposition to thoughts demonstrated by logical accord, argumentum advertisement veracundium. Anybody? The dread of causing offense, or more terrible, making offense those with extremely noisy online life existences, is to a great extent behind this appalling circumstance. Researchers ought not be smothered, and it doesn't make a difference how hostile their revelations or perspectives, they ought to be put out in the outside air for banter. In the event that we are not permitted to contend against thoughts, in what capacity can we genuinely demonstrate them to not be right, or to demonstrate their inverse to be true? From nature to race and sexual orientation, another philosophy is being shaped, and addressing it is equivalent to blasphemy, with disgracing and shunning turning into the new consuming at the stake. 8-2 Zombie Apocalypse. The first thing I did when New Zealand shops and eateries reopened after the coronavirus lockdown was go through the day in the city perusing the shops and eating with companions. Under the new safeguards that permit us to keep everything open, a few shops need to constrain the complete number of clients inside their stores at some random time. This has prompted lines outside a large number of our fundamental shops, lines any semblance of which one typically would just find in socialist or communist nations. Wellington City has no shopping centers, so the roads are currently loaded up with individuals cordially holding up outside stores while gazing at sparkling telephone screens in their grasp. It occurred to me, the zombie end times isn't something from a blood and gore film or TV arrangement, it is here the present moment. Rather than talking and sharing our encounters and information, rather than perusing a book or even a magazine, individuals are messing around or watching recordings on YouTube, the ones Google hasn't stifled at this point. This is the zombie end of the world, and it is willful. Until you see a city road loaded with individuals with empty appearances gazing intently at, you can't genuinely acknowledge how frightening this truly is. As openly as we have decided to demolish our cerebrums along these lines, we should likewise unreservedly decide to stop. At this phase appears to be improbable. I trust I am wrong. 9. One historic information sources may vanish. Social separating will have numerous genuine thump on impacts that are unexpected. With certain spots previously forbidding money because of paper being such a decent transporter for the infection, it is conceivable to feel that organizations of human information, for example, libraries and, to a lesser degree historical centers, may inevitably likewise be covered for the sake of open well-being. This would be mostly sensible if not for the way that the remainder of the things on this rundown are likewise happening at the equivalent time. Once all destinations are gone with the exception of the exceptionally sketchy Wikipedia toward the finish of Google's pursued Holocaust, we could get ourselves at last untethered from the mutual pool of information on our precursors, whereupon we have manufactured our stunning and superb society. 10. Why is this happening? It is anything but difficult to control one huge partnership and difficult to control a large number of little ones. Distributist financial aspects, my preferred kind, contends that there are not an excessive number of industrialists, yet rather excessively few. I took that from G.K. Chesterton, inclining toward the methods for creation to be held by numerous privately owned company as opposed to monster partnerships. What we are finding on the planet presently is a drive to the inverse. The people pulling the strings, anything you desire to call them, comprehend that to keep up control of enormous pieces of society and how we think and capacity requires the finish of private ventures. This may not be 100% the purpose behind the peculiar changes we are presently surviving, yet paying little heed to the goal, it is sheltered to state that each and every day, increasingly more data is being expelled from the web and made inaccessible. We cannot, at this point, imagine that we are in a blossoming brilliant period of information. We remain near the precarious edge of the best dim age in mankind's history. Be that as it may, to end on a second and progressively positive quote by T.S. Eliot, the haziness proclaims the greatness of light. Perhaps we can take some comfort in that. 11.